Your imagination is the only reality. These are the words of Neville Goddard. Words that, if understood deeply, will change the entire way you view yourself, others, and your place in the world. Because in truth, you're not manifesting through effort or chance, or waiting for things to align outside of you. You are always manifesting through the state you occupy, through the assumptions you persist in, the inner conversations you entertain, and the feelings you allow to dominate your being. But what happens when the world you've assumed, the reality you're building within, is constantly disrupted? Not by trauma, not by major life events, but by people. People who seem kind, supportive, logical, loving, yet unknowingly, they plant seeds of doubt. They invite you back into the realm of facts. They feed the old identity you've been shedding. They weaken the bond between you and your imagined end. This video is not about demonizing others. It's about discernment. Neville taught that consciousness is the only cause and that everyone in your world plays a role according to your inner assumptions, which means the people who weaken your faith and imagination are not obstacles. They are reflections of where your own self-concept remains vulnerable. So this is not a warning. It's an invitation to protect your energy, not by pushing people away, but by staying loyal to your assumed reality. By recognizing the 6 types of people who, if unexamined, can unconsciously block your manifestation power. Some do it with sweet concern, others with a laugh. Some mean well, others just reflect your doubts. But if you can see them clearly, and more importantly, see what part of you they mirror, then you can rise. You can reclaim your attention. You can stop trying to persuade others and start persuading yourself. Because once you feel it real, once you dwell in the end, then your world must bend to match your inner state. So stay with me. By the end of this journey, you'll not only be able to spot these 6 illusion makers, you'll know how to neutralize them without a single word. Not through confrontation, but through consciousness. Let's begin. The inner law is the true battlefield of manifestation. What if the battlefield of manifestation isn't outside of you at all? Not in the marketplace. Not in relationships, not in your job, your bank account, or your body. What if the only place your desires are ever won or lost is within? Neville Goddard taught that consciousness is the only reality, that everything you experience in the outer world is merely a reflection of an internal state. This means that manifestation is never about controlling people, manipulating outcomes, or chasing after results. It is always about assuming the state of the wish fulfilled and persisting in that assumption until the outer world mirrors it. The law of assumption is not a technique. It is a law because it operates whether you believe in it or not. You are always assuming something about yourself, about others, about life. And these assumptions, when persisted in, harden into fact. But here is the challenge. Most of us are not guarding our assumptions. We are letting them be shaped by the voices around us, by subtle doubts, by well-meaning conversations, by people we care about. And so our inner world becomes porous. We start building a new reality in imagination, and then allow someone else's fear, logic, or limitation to pull us out of it. Let me offer you a metaphor. Imagine your imagination as a sacred garden. You plant the seeds of your desire. You water them with feeling. You nurture them through attention. But what happens when you leave the gate open? What happens when others walk through? Not with intention, but with carelessness, stepping on the sprouts, scattering weeds, rearranging what you've sown. This is what happens every time you allow someone else's perception to overwrite your assumption. Neville said, "You rise to a higher level of consciousness not by changing people, but by changing your concept of them." That includes how you see them, how you listen to them, and how much power you give their voice over your state. So ask yourself, who have I allowed to become an authority in my inner world? Whose doubts do I carry as if they were my own? Whose limitations do I recite even in silence? This is not about blame, it is about clarity. Because once you know that your attention is power, you can stop giving it away so freely. You can become still, you can observe, and you can choose. From this moment forward, choose not who gets to speak, but who gets to shape. Choose whose voice deserves access to the garden of your imagination, because the only true threat to your manifestation is not others. It's the unguarded gate. And now, it's time to identify who's been walking through it. The illusion maker is doubt in disguise. Not all threats to your manifestation power come cloaked in criticism. Some arrive dressed in love, in logic, in helpfulness. The illusion maker is the person who, on the surface, seems to support you. They may smile, ask thoughtful questions, offer practical advice, but listen closely and you'll hear the quiet erosion of your faith in the unseen. Their words often carry an unspoken premise. Imagination is not enough. They want proof. They want guarantees. They want you to stay anchored to what's visible, measurable, explainable. They are not trying to hurt you, but they are inviting you over and over again to abandon your inner knowing for outer facts. Neville warned of this. He said, "Do not accept the evidence of the senses. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." The illusion maker tempts you to do the opposite. They subtly reinforce the idea that the world outside is more real than the world within. Imagine your desired state is a lit candle. The illusion maker doesn't blow it out directly. They cup their hand around it, pretending to protect it, while slowly drawing it into the wind. They say things like, "Just be realistic. Don't get ahead of yourself. Are you sure this is going to work?" These are not statements. They are spells. Tiny invitations to shift your assumption from fulfillment to fear. So what do? You don't argue. You don't convince. You return to your state. You remind yourself that the only reality worth being loyal to is the one you are creating through feeling. The illusion maker is not your enemy. They are a reflection of your own temptation to worship the shadow instead of the light within. When they speak, you don't have to reject them. You only have to reject the assumption behind their words. Ask yourself, where am I still seeking outer validation for an inner truth? Who do I believe more than I believe myself? If you know the end, if you felt it real, then you owe no explanation. Hold the vision, hold the flame, let them talk, but do not let them touch the wick. The mirror of doubt is reflecting your inner hesitation. There is a particular kind of person who doesn't attack your dreams directly. They don't try to discourage you. They simply ask questions, not out of malice, but out of concern. Are you really sure this is going to happen? What if it doesn't work out? Shouldn't you have a backup plan? At first, they seem innocent, reasonable, even caring. But look again. Their presence in your life is not random. They are the mirror of your own doubt. Neville taught, everyone is yourself pushed out. When someone challenges your desire, your process, or your assumption, they are only echoing a frequency you still hold within yourself. The mirror of doubt appears when your assumption wavers, when you're not fully anchored in the end. They live from the outside in. They see life as a set of facts, conditions, and probabilities. So when you speak from imagination, they tilt their head in confusion. When you declare the end, they look for evidence. And if they can't find it, they reflect that lack back to you. But here is what Neville made clear. It is not their belief in your dream that matters. It is your belief. Because the only thing they are ever doing is revealing what you still hesitate to assume. So how do you respond? Not with argument, not with defensiveness. You respond by shifting the state you're in, by reaffirming the end, not to them, but to yourself. You revise the interaction after it happens. You imagine them congratulating you, supporting you, agreeing with your fulfillment. And when you do, something remarkable occurs. They either begin to reflect your new assumption, or they fade from your life altogether. Ask yourself, who always seems to test my faith in imagination? And what part of me still needs their doubt in order to feel safe? Remember, the mirror is never there to insult you. It is there to show you what you are still choosing to believe. And once you change the assumption, the reflection must follow. Before we move into the next type, pause for just a moment. What if the very thing blocking your manifestation has nothing to do with action, but everything to do with who you're listening to? If this is stirring something in you, check the pinned comment. There's a message there designed to keep you anchored in the truth of who you are, and remind you how to protect your state when the world tries to pull you out of it. Now, let's continue. The next type doesn't question your dream. They question you. The energetic saboteur doesn't come into your life shouting. They don't confront your dreams directly or argue against your spiritual path. No, they whisper, they sigh, they speak in tones of care, concern, and sometimes even humor. But beneath their surface lies a single function: to redirect your attention away from your assumption of the wish fulfilled and anchor you in the assumption of fear, limitation, and what is commonly called reality. Neville Goddard taught, your attention must be developed, controlled, and concentrated if you are to change your concept of yourself and thereby change your future. He warned us that attention is not passive, it is active creation. What you continually attend to becomes your world, because where attention goes, Imagination flows. And where imagination flows, your life takes shape. The energetic saboteur is not necessarily ill-intentioned. Often they are someone close to you, a family member, a coworker, a friend who lives from the assumption that life is hard, change is unlikely, and big dreams are naive. Their identity is tied to worry, struggle, or skepticism, and they invite you into that frequency under the guise of connection. You'll know you've been around them because of how you feel after, not during, because during the conversation you may be nodding, empathizing, explaining, but afterward there's a dullness, a heaviness. The vision that was so clear in your mind begins to flicker. Doubt creeps in, not as a loud declaration but as a quiet, persistent question. What if they're right? What if it doesn't work? These people are not evil. They are not to be hated. They are, as Neville would say, projections of a former state, a state in which you once believed that effort was more powerful than assumption, that logic overruled faith, and that imagination was merely a fantasy, not a creative force. You see, the energetic saboteur can only exist in your world if you still partially identify with the version of yourself that resonates with their frequency, the version that needs to explain itself, justify its dreams, or worse, seek permission to desire more. Imagine for a moment your desire is a sacred flame. It doesn't need defense, it doesn't need explanation, but it does need protection. The energetic saboteur brings wind, not a storm, just a breeze. And if you're not conscious, you'll let your attention drift toward their wind and away from your own fire. So what's the practice? It begins with awareness. Notice how your body feels when you're in their presence. Are you shrinking to meet them? Are you diluting your truth to avoid their discomfort? Are you changing the subject away from what matters most to you? Second, reclaim your attention. You don't need to argue or convince. You only need to return to the end. The moment they speak from fear, speak inwardly from fulfillment. Persist in the assumption that your desire is already yours. Even if they can't see it, you can feel it. Finally, ask yourself with honesty, who in my life drains my creative energy? Not because they mean harm, but because I still meet them at the level of who I used to be. Because once you stop meeting them there, once you elevate your inner conversations, they either rise with you or fall away. The energetic saboteur cannot survive where attention is sovereign, and in your world you are the sovereign. The persona enforcer is the keeper of your former self. There is a quiet force in your world that works against your transformation, not through hostility but through familiarity, not through criticism but through memory. The persona enforcer is the one who insists you remain who you were, not who you are becoming. They may laugh with you, love you, even speak your language, but the version of you they recognize is the version you are trying to outgrow. Neville Goddard said, "You must be willing to die to who you were before you can become who you are meant to be." This death is not physical. It's the death of identity, the death of habit, the death of a concept of self that no longer aligns with your imagined end. But the persona enforcer doesn't want that death. They want consistency. They want you to be who you've always been, because it makes them feel stable, safe, in control. They are the ones who remind you of your old habits, your failures, your past mistakes. They finish your sentences with stories you've stopped telling. They use your name the way it used to sound, filled with limitation or lack. They say things like, "You've never been that kind of person. Come on, that's not really you. You're changing too much." On the surface, it seems harmless, even nostalgic, but beneath it lies a deeper dynamic. They are guarding the prison of your old assumptions. Think of your self-concept like a costume. Each assumption you hold about yourself is a thread. Over time, you've woven an entire outfit, a role, but manifestation begins when you try on something new, a new identity, a new state. The persona enforcer doesn't like that. They prefer the old costume because they know how to relate to it. Your transformation threatens the script they've memorized. Neville emphasized that imagination must override memory, that to live from the end, you must become it, before anyone else sees it. The persona enforcer challenges this by constantly dragging you back into the script you no longer wish to perform. But here's the key. They can only succeed if you still seek their approval, if some part of you still believes your old self is who you are, or worse, who you're supposed to be. So what's the solution? You don't need to confront them, you need to outgrow them. Silently, steadily, internally. Start by rehearsing new inner conversations. When you remember their words, revise them. When you see their face in your mind, imagine them smiling at the new you. Visualize them saying, "I always knew you could do it." even if they never have. Ask yourself, who in my life continues to address a version of me that no longer exists? What stories about myself am I still allowing others to repeat on my behalf? You are not obligated to live inside someone else's memory of you. Let the past version go. Let it die in imagination, and watch how the world and the people in it begin to treat you accordingly. The suppressed dreamer is the voice of abandoned desire. There's a certain sadness that speaks softly but carries great weight. The sadness of someone who once dreamed, once imagined, once reached for something beyond their current circumstances, and then gave up. This is the suppressed dreamer. They are not bitter, not overtly. In fact, they may be gentle, kind, even encouraging, until your imagination begins to challenge their resignation. The moment you start to speak from fulfillment, from boldness, from certainty, they subtly pull you back. Not because they don't want the best for you, but because they have made peace with the idea that their dream didn't come true, and your belief becomes a mirror they're not ready to look into. Neville Goddard wrote, "Imagination is the only redemptive power, but the suppressed dreamer has abandoned that power. They've traded it for realism, for practicality, for what they call maturity. And now, when you speak from faith, when you assume your desire as already fulfilled, they gently warn you. They say things like, just don't get your hopes too high. You've got to be careful. Disappointment is painful. Sometimes it's better to be realistic. But this caution is not care. It is a defense mechanism. Because if you succeed, not through effort, but through assumption, you will prove something they're not ready to accept, that they could have chosen differently. And so, unconsciously, they try to protect you from the very thing they couldn't face, the heartbreak of a dream deferred. The danger here is not in their words, but in your compassion. You may feel tempted to lower your vision to meet them where they are, to soften your desire so they don't feel uncomfortable, to dull your light so their shadows don't look so deep. But Neville would ask, why would you deny the reality of imagination just to spare someone else the responsibility of their own? Imagine your desire as a great tree, rooted in conviction, stretching toward the sky. The suppressed dreamer doesn't come with an axe. They come with a whisper. Maybe you don't need to grow so tall. And if you listen, you begin to shrink, not because you've changed your mind, but because you've accepted their limit as your own. So what can you do? First, feel compassion, not pity. Compassion. Recognize that they represent an old version of you, a time when you too might have feared disappointment more than you trusted imagination. Then, revise the relationship. In your mind, see them waking up to their own desire. Hear them supporting yours. Visualize them as someone reborn, not someone broken. And finally, ask yourself, where am I still afraid of success? Because it might separate me from those I love. Have I confused shrinking with loyalty? Remember, you were not born to dim your vision to soothe the wounds of others. You were born to imagine boldly, to show, not just say, that imagination creates reality. And sometimes your courage to persist in the wish fulfilled is the very thing that inspires the suppressed dreamer to dream again. The moral realist is virtue as a cage. The final figure in this quiet cast of characters is perhaps the most deceptive. They don't speak from fear or disappointment. They speak from principle, from values, from what seems like wisdom. The moral realist cloaks their doubt in virtue. They are not against your desires, so long as they're modest, so long as they don't ask for too much, so long as they stay within the lines drawn by culture, tradition, or inherited ideas of what's acceptable. You've heard their voice before. You should be grateful for what you have. Isn't wanting more a bit selfish? Don't you think that's a little excessive? And on the surface, it all sounds reasonable, even noble. But behind their questions lies a subtle implication. To desire more is to be ungrateful. To want better is to betray humility. To imagine beyond your present means is to violate some sacred moral code. But Neville Goddard's teaching was the opposite. He wrote, "Gratitude is not for what is, but for what is imagined." Gratitude, in the true spiritual sense, is not a celebration of your current limitations. It is the emotional signature of already having received what you've assumed. It is not about resigning to what is, but feeling from the fulfillment of your desire, as if it were already yours. The moral realist doesn't see this. They mistake contentment for a ceiling. They believe that staying small is honorable, that playing it safe is somehow spiritual. But you must ask yourself, is playing small truly virtuous, or simply convenient for those who fear expansion? This figure often appears in religious spaces, cultural expectations, or the inherited voices of family. You may hear your own parents in these words. A teacher, a leader, someone who once seemed wise. But just because a voice is calm and measured doesn't mean it's aligned with truth. The moral realist may even quote scripture, philosophy, or tradition to justify their resistance to desire. But Neville would remind us, man is all imagination. To deny imagination is to deny the divine. Think of it this way, if imagination is the doorway to God in you, then to suppress it in the name of morality is to close the door under the illusion that you're doing the right thing. So how do you respond? Not by rejecting gratitude, but by redefining it. Not by denying morality, but by freeing it from limitation. You feel grateful not from your lack, but from your fulfillment. You stand in the end and say, thank you, not because you're settling, but because you already possess what you've assumed. And if others question that, let them. Their doubt is not your burden. Ask yourself, where have I confused humility with self-denial? Whose version of morality have I adopted at the expense of my imagination? You were not born to worship limitation and call it virtue. You were born to imagine freely, love boldly, and live from the truth that your desires are divine. Release the guilt. Assume the end. And let your imagination become the highest expression of gratitude there is. You've now met 6 subtle characters, 6 energies that often go unnoticed yet constantly shape the landscape of your inner world. They rarely announce themselves. They rarely shout. Instead, they whisper, question, repeat, and if you are not conscious, you begin to answer them, not just with words but with your state of being. Neville Goddard taught a truth so radical, so quietly revolutionary, that most overlook its simplicity. Consciousness is the only reality. Not some part of reality, not one influence among many, the only one. This means that every person in your life, every situation, every challenge, and yes, every one of these 6 characters, is not happening to you. They are happening through you, as projections of your own consciousness, reflections of your assumptions made visible. The illusion maker, a mirror of your own temptation to believe more in facts than in faith. The mirror of doubt, a reflection of your hesitation to fully commit to the unseen. The energetic saboteur, a manifestation of the places where you still give your attention to fear. The persona enforcer, a reminder that you haven't fully died to your former self. The suppressed dreamer, a call to heal the part of you that once stopped believing. The moral realist, a signpost pointing to inherited beliefs that bind desire with guilt. And this is where everything turns. Because once you realize that these 6 are not enemies, but indicators, your role shifts. You are no longer the victim of outer influence. You become the curator of your state. You begin to understand that manifestation is not about controlling others, avoiding conflict, or purifying your social circle. It is about remaining loyal to your assumption no matter what appears. As Neville said, persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is your real task. Not arguing with the doubters. Not proving yourself to skeptics. Not editing your desires for comfort or moral approval. Your only task is to feel from the end and persist. Persistence is not struggle. It is quiet inner conviction. The moment you slip into trying to convince someone else, you've stepped out of the end. The moment you begin defending your dream, you've left the state of already having it. The outer world will always try to test your fidelity to imagination. That is its job. Your job is to remember who the author is. And so, if someone doubts you, let them. If someone tries to fit you back into your former self, smile gently and return to your new one. If someone reflects fear or envy or limitation, recognize the part of you that once believed the same. Then, reclaim the mirror. This is where the most subtle, most profound shift happens. You realize you do not need to remove anyone from your life to manifest. You simply need to revise the state from which you perceive them. As Neville taught, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. So what if, instead of fearing the influence of these people, you revised them in imagination? What if you saw the illusion maker as someone now inspired by possibility, the suppressed dreamer as someone rekindled by hope, the persona enforcer as someone cheering for your evolution? What if, by persisting in your new self, you gave them permission to rise too? Because here is the hidden beauty in all of this. These people, these roles, these reflections, they're not here to defeat you. They're here to awaken you. They are not punishments. They are mirrors asking for new assumptions. And once you give them new roles in imagination, they will begin to reflect those roles in form. Ask yourself now, who in my world am I willing to see anew? Who have I been trying to change rather than revising my concept of them? Let this be your practice. See them as changed. See yourself as fulfilled. See the world as responding to your inner shift. This is the power of awakened imagination. Not to destroy, not to isolate, but to redeem. And when you live from the end, faithfully, quietly, consistently, these former blockers may transform into your greatest supporters. Because in truth, there is only one being here, one cause, one source, one power, and that power is your consciousness. Now you know. You've walked through a quiet unveiling. You've looked into the eyes of 6 familiar figures, perhaps realizing for the first time how deeply they shape your inner atmosphere, not because of who they are, but because of who you momentarily become in their presence. The true challenge has never been them. It has always been your state. Neville Goddard said, "The world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself." Once you fully accept this, the dynamic between you and every other person in your world changes. You stop reacting. You begin observing. And then, you create, not through force or persuasion, but through assumption. To protect your energy is not to build walls. It is to build consciousness. It is to become so rooted in the feeling of the wish fulfilled that no voice, whether it whispers doubt, dresses up limitation as love, or calls you back into your past, can shake your foundation. You become the stillness that sees, the presence that chooses. And this is what it means to manifest as a conscious being. Not to eliminate all contrast, but to transmute it. Not to hide from challenge, but to meet it as evidence of your unfolding mastery. Ask yourself here and now as we close, which of these 6 types still holds influence over your attention? Which voice still lives rent-free in your imagination? And are you willing, truly willing, to replace their echo with your own knowing? Your imagination is sacred ground. It is not a playground for the opinions of others. It is not a debate stage. It is not a courtroom where your desires must defend themselves. It is the origin of everything you will ever call real. So treat it as holy. Guard it not with tension, but with reverence. Return to it often. Let it speak louder than the outer world. And when others challenge you, when their faces appear, speaking the old scripts, smile gently, and feel the end anyway. Feel it until it feels natural, until it feels inevitable, until it feels like memory. Because once you truly dwell in that state, the world must rearrange to match it, and the very people who once doubted you may find themselves inspired by you. The mirrors will shift, the cast will change, but not because you fought them, because you remembered who you are. You are not at the mercy of influence. You are the source of it. You are not shaped by others. You are shaping them through assumption. So protect your energy, not with fear, with awareness, with love, with quiet authority, and above all, with the unwavering decision to assume the end and live from it, always. So as you step back into your day, into your relationships, your conversations, your inner world, carry this with you. Your state creates, your attention builds, your assumption governs. And if you're ready to take this understanding one layer deeper, if something in you stirred, questioned, or awakened while listening, check the pinned comment, not because you have to, but because something you didn't know you were looking for might be waiting there.